Hey everyone, welcome to the Open World of Warcraft, where we focus on open world PvE content in World of Warcraft, including leveling, world quests, delves, etc. My name is Setsuko, and in this video I want to go over the Shaman class tree and just kind of cover the different talents, what I think about them, give you an opinion on them so that you know whether or not the talents are good for picking up for open world content, what you can skip, and if you're trying to put together your own build, then you just got an opinion for when you're questioning whether or not you should pick up a talent. So that's what we're going to do here today. We're primarily going to be looking at the enhancement talent tree here, but we will look at differences between elemental and restoration as well. And I'll try to give you a perspective on all of the specializations as we touch on the talent tree. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll just take a look at the starter talents here for each of the different specializations because they are different from one to the other. So for enhancement, we're going to start out with Astral Shift, which is a defensive ability. 2-minute cooldown. It's going to allow us to take 40% less damage for 12 seconds when we cast it. Okay, we also get Chain Lightning, which is basically just a AoE DPS ability here. It's going to deal damage and jump to nearby enemies, affecting up to 3 additional targets. Okay, and then for enhancement here, if Chain Lightning hits more than one target, each target hit by your Chain Lightning increases the damage of your next Crash Lightning, which is a specialization ability as well. Over on the elemental side, we are going to start with Chain Lightning, which in this case for elemental will generate 2 additional Maelstrom, which is our special resource for Shaman here. And then we're also going to start with Lava Burst, which will hurl molten lava at the target, dealing fire damage. It will always critically strike if the target is affected by Flame Shock, which we will have pretty much at all times, and it will generate some of that resource for us. And then for restoration, we're going to start with Lava Burst, and we're also going to start with Chain Heal. So this will heal a friendly target and then jump to nearby allies. So in general, looking at these here, Chain Heal to me is not really a great pickup for open world content. In a lot of open world content, you're going to be playing by yourself, maybe with one other friend, and hopefully you have other ways to heal yourself than just casting this 2.5 second long chain heal cast here. So generally not a great pickup. Lava Burst is a good pickup, pretty much mandatory in my opinion for elemental and restoration. Optional, potentially useful in enhancement, but generally on enhancement it's a skip for me. Astral Shift is a mandatory pickup for all 3 specializations, not just because it's nice to have the defensive cooldown, but because it leads into some other important talents that we want to pick up on the second row. And then Chain Lightning, you're pretty much going to have that on every specialization as well. So I would basically consider that one mandatory. You get it for enhancement and elemental, and then for restoration, you're just going to want to pick it up to have another multi-target damaging ability. Moving on to the second row, we have Earth Shield. So Earth Shield will protect the target with an Earthen Shield, increasing the healing that you do to them and healing them when they take damage. This can only happen every couple of seconds, and it has 9 charges that it uses. You can cast this on yourself, so generally speaking, if you've got talent points to spare and you want a little extra healing, you can pick up Earth Shield. However, on all 3 specializations, the primary shield that you're going to want to use is going to be your Lightning Shield, and in order to take advantage of Earthen Shield, you're going to need to grab this next talent here called Elemental Orbit. This increases the number of elemental shields you can have active on yourself by 1. So it says you can have Earth Shield on yourself and 1 ally at a time. So basically you would pick this up so that you can have your Earth Shield and Lightning Shield on at the same time. If you can only choose one or the other, you're going to want Lightning Shield. So if you're not going to pick up this talent, I wouldn't pick up Earth Shield either. So to me, they're a 2-point talent pair that you need to pick up if you're going to do those. Next, we have Wind Shear. Wind Shear is pretty much a mandatory across all specializations. This is our interruption. So if an enemy is casting a spell, this allows us to interrupt them, and it prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 2 seconds. Interrupts are huge in open world content. You're going to use them all the time. So again, mandatory pickup here. Next, we have a choice node. We've got Plains Traveler. This reduces the cooldown of Astral Shift, which is our defensive ability, by 30 seconds, bringing it from 2 to a minute and a half. Or we have Astral Bulwark, which reduces the damage taken by an additional 20%, moving it from 40% to 60%. In general, we shouldn't have to be using Astral Shift a lot. It's kind of a oh crap button, and for that reason, I prefer to have a stronger damage reduction when I do need to use the ability over being able to use the ability often, because we shouldn't need to use it often, but when we do need to use it, we want to get as much value out of it as we can. So for me, Astral Bulwark is the pickup here. However, either one of these is okay, depending on whatever you're more comfortable with. Next, we have a choice between Spirit Wolf and Thunderous Paws. So Spirit Wolf will make it so that when you are in Ghost Wolf form, you'll gain 5% increased movement speed and 5% damage reduction every second, stacking up to 4 times. So you can get 20% increased movement speed and 20% damage reduction. Really, we're just concerned about the movement speed here, and this is generally a nice pickup. However, with the introduction of the new flight style across all of World of Warcraft and not just Dragonflight, a lot of what you will do in Ghost Wolf form is just move from enemy to enemy, not necessarily location to location. So this isn't as valuable as it used to be. This used to be my go-to pick, but now a lot of that long travel will generally be done on your flying mounts. However, this is nice if you're going to be in the dungeon or down somewhere where you can't actually mount up. It does give you a nice speed bonus there. Thunderous Paws will make Ghost Wolf remove the snares that are on you, and it increases your movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds when you shift into Ghost Wolf, and this can only occur every 20 seconds. Now, because of the situation with the new flight style, I tend to take Thunderous Paws because I am using Ghost Wolf pretty much to go from enemy to enemy or small area, short area to another one. And so that initial burst of 25% speed, usually I'm in Ghost Wolf 3 to 5 seconds, so that's really nice. But you can honestly pick up either one of these. Now, Frost Shock is an ability we can pick up here. It chills the target, causing frost damage and reducing the target's movement speed. This is, for enhancements, kind of an optional pickup. It's a good pickup across all specializations, but if you want to use the points somewhere else, I think you can skip Frost Shock here. There are some enhancement builds that revolve around Frost Shock. For Elemental and Restoration, generally speaking, I like Frost Shock because of the reduction in movement speed. So you can open with a spell, cast Frost Shock, and then that way you get that movement speed reduction on the enemy as they're approaching you. You get more time to do damage to them before they can start dealing damage to you and or interrupting you. So Frost Shock to me is you can take it, you can leave it. It just kind of depends on what you're doing with your build. And then we have Winds of Alakir. Increase the movement speed bonus of Ghost Wolf by 10% at all times. And when you have 3 or more totems active, your movement speed is increased by 15%. So this one is, to me, a mandatory pickup for the 10% movement speed bonus on Ghost Wolf. The totem portion of that is not super relevant. If you're playing a Restoration Shaman in like a dungeon setting, you're going to have a lot of totems out. Also, if you do go the totemic hero talent tree here, you'll have more totems out, so that might be kind of relevant. But we're really just picking this up for the 10% movement speed increase on Ghost Wolf. Going down to our next one, we already talked about this one here. Mandatory pickup if you are going to pick up Earth Shield. Next, we have Fire and Ice. This increases all fire and frost damage that you deal by 3%. All 3 specializations deal fire damage, so this is a mandatory pickup to me. 3% increased damage is nice there. And then you may be dealing some frost damage either with Frost Shock or some of your other specialization skills here. Ancestral Wolf Affinity, Cleanse Spirit, Wind Shear, Purge, and Totem Cast no longer cancel Ghost Wolf. I'm not too worried about this one here. Cleanse Spirit, you're generally not going to be casting or using. Wind Shear is your interrupt, which you'll be using once you start fighting something. And if you've already started fighting something, then you're not in Ghost Wolf form anyway. Purge kind of is the same as Cleanse Spirits. And then Totem Cast, again, not really like a big deal here. I would, consider this more of a pickup for like PvP if you were going to be running away in Ghost Wolf or something like that and you wanted to drop, like a totem to reduce the movement speed of your opponents or something like that. Next, we have Capacitor Totem. Capacitor Totem is a totem on a 1-minute cooldown that stuns all targets within 8 yards for 3 seconds. So this is an AoE stun ability. Very nice pickup here. Again, I think optional, but in most of the builds that I use, I do end up picking this up at some point. It's just nice to have a big AoE stun in case you get yourself into a situation that you don't want to be in. The kind of thing here about Capacitor Totem, which is interesting to me, is that there is a 2-second delay on that stun. So it's not like an instant AoE stun, which to me, if it was, it would be a little bit better. But this is a pickup, you can take it or leave it. Next, we have a choice between Spirit Walk and Gust of Wind. So Spirit Walk removes all movement impairing effects and increases your movement speed by 60% for 8 seconds. And Gust of Wind is on a 20-second cooldown and it just hurls you forward. Now, Gust of Wind does allow you to use this ability a lot more often, but what I find on Shaman is that you have, your Ghost Wolf with your burst of speed that you're getting from Thunderous Paws that you can just pop into and out of whenever you want, and honestly, that really gets the job done. So what I prefer to take here is Spirit Walk to get a 60% movement speed bonus every minute for 8 seconds, just to kind of like really book it somewhere. This is really useful even if you're indoors and things like that. So I usually end up taking Spirit Walk here, but you could take either one of these. I just find that Gust of Wind being on a 20-second cooldown makes it a little bit clunky, where like you want to use it as often as you can, especially when you're traveling, but like at the same time, it's just you're hitting it all the time. So I prefer Spirit Walk here. Now, if you do pick up Frost Shock, you will get the opportunity to choose between a choice node here. Encasing Cold will snare targets by an additional 10% and increase the duration of the snare. And then Arctic Snowstorm will make it so that enemies within 10 yards of your Frost Shock are snared by 30%. Generally speaking here, Encasing Cold is the one that I prefer because you're going to get more of a snare and the duration is going to increase, especially on Elemental and Restoration. I would take Encasing Cold. Arctic Snowstorm can be a little bit more usable on your Enhancement Shaman because you're more likely to have a bunch of enemies crowded around you, and so being able to do an AoE snare here is fine. Again, this one is skippable whether or not you have Frost Shock, so if you don't have Frost Shock, you're obviously not getting it. If you do have Frost Shock, you don't really need to put a point here in any of these for open world content, but in general for Restoration Elemental, I would recommend Encasing Cold. Next, we have Brimming with Life. Maximum health increased by 10%. While you're at full health, reincarnation cools down 75% faster. To me, this is like just a really, really good pickup for all specializations. 10% maximum health is huge, especially considering that we have, no real like great damage mitigation. We do have recovery through healing and things like that, but 10% maximum health is just great. Also, if you do need to use reincarnation, getting that 75% faster cooldown means you can use it more often. Hopefully you're not needing to use it, but you never know. Moving on to our next row, we have Healing Stream Totem. So this is a 30-second recharge ability that will summon a healing totem at your feet for 15 seconds that heals you over time. This is an okay pickup if you want another source of healing, or if you can tie it into some bonuses from some of your specialization abilities as well. But in general, this is potentially a skippable talent as well here. Just depends on what you want to build into. Next, we have Earth Grab Totem. This summons a totem at the location for 20 seconds. Roots all enemies. Not a big deal here. 30-second cooldown. If you find that you're really struggling with enemies running up on you and like your Frost Shock plus your Encasing Cold and stuff like that is not really doing the job, you could pick up Earth Grab Totem to snare things if you are Elemental or Restoration and you're trying to keep things at a distance. But generally speaking, this is another skippable one to me. Really, a lot of these Shaman totems are, in general, just kind of skippable or situational depending on how you like to play or what issues you're having. Next, if you've gone into Capacitor Totem, then you have a choice node here between Static Charge, which reduces the cooldown of Capacitor Totem by 5 seconds for each enemy it stuns, up to a maximum of 20 seconds, which means you can get it down to a 40-second cooldown potentially, if you are pulling, 4 mobs, which for most of these specializations, you're not going to want to do that too often. You can a little bit on enhancement, because you've got some pretty decent melee AoE, but in general for shamans, I'm looking at more of a 1 to 3 pull at a time sort of play style here. Our other option is Guardian's Cudgel. So when the totem fades or is destroyed, it drops another one automatically in the same place. I vastly prefer this because you're getting 2 uses out of every drop of Capacitor Totem, and you're getting a double stun. Now, if you find that it's nice to have the stun and then you just kind of delete everything, then Static Charge would be pretty nice there. But in general, when I'm doing Capacitor Totem, it's because I'm doing a large pull, or I'm doing it on something that has a high health pull, and so getting a double stun out of that is really valuable in my opinion. So my preference here is Guardian's Cudgel. Our next choice node here is between Purge and Greater Purge. So Purge will remove a beneficial magic effect from an enemy, and Greater Purge will remove 2. In general, this is a skippable for me. I'm not worried about removing beneficial magical effects from enemies because they usually aren't alive long enough for it to matter. However, if you were looking into this, maybe you were fighting some enemies that just had a really nasty buff on themselves, and you were going to be fighting a lot of them, then I would go for Purge, as Purge doesn't have a cooldown. Our last active ability on this row is going to be Earth Elemental. So this is a 5-minute cooldown, calls forth a greater Earth Elemental to protect you and your allies for a minute, and it increases your maximum health by 15% while the elemental is out. This is a really nice oh crap button, sort of an additional defense because the Earth Elemental will taunt enemies around you. I like to pick this up pretty much on all 3 specializations, and either use it when I'm fighting like a rare spawn or an elite, or you can use it if maybe you get in too far over your head and you pull too many enemies and you're about to die. So moving on to the next row, we've got Elemental Resistance. So healing from Healing Stream Totem reduces fire, frost, and nature damage taken by 6% for 3 seconds. Again, another okay pickup if you were going to go into Healing Stream Totem anyway. It's okay, but again, it's also skippable. You're going to be facing a lot of different types of damage here, and the vast majority of open world damage that gets dealt to you is going to be physical, generally from auto attacks and things like that. And there's also many other different types of damage that can be done to you as well. So this is a limited damage reduction. So skippable unless you're kind of already going in there and you want to get down to the next talents here. Cleanse Spirit removes all curse effects from your friendly targets. Again, to me, this one is pretty skippable. Not too worried about those. You would basically just be using this on yourself. And in general, there's not a lot of like terrible curse effects out in the open world for you to worry about. Next, we have Tremor Totem. So this summons a totem at your feet that shakes the ground around it for 10 seconds, removing fear, charm, sleep from party and raid members. Again, situational. If you're fighting enemies that do a lot of fear, maybe you could spec into Tremor Totem, but generally this one is a skippable for me as well. Nature's Guardian. When your health is brought below 35%, you instantly heal for 20% of your maximum health, and this cannot occur more than once every 45 seconds. Again, this is just a nice quality of life comfort pickup talent. I pretty much grab this on all specializations. Again, if you do drop below 35%, you get a 20% heal. 45 seconds, that's a pretty low cooldown, so this can happen pretty often to you. If you're struggling and you're learning and you find yourself getting down to 35%, this is great, but also if you just want to push yourself and do bigger pulls, this can help you with that as well. Next, increase the critical strike chance of your nature spells and abilities. So this is going to apply to all 3 specializations. For nature spells, we've got our lightning bolts, we've got our chain lightning that we're going to be using quite a bit. So those are really nice, especially for like enhancements. This is going to up your storm strike. In general, this is just a really good pickup for 4% increased critical strike chance on a spell category that we're in quite a bit. Next, we have Refreshing Waters. So this makes your Healing Surge 25% more effective on yourself. Generally, Healing Surge is going to be one of the main healing abilities you're going to be using on yourself on all specializations. And I really, really like to pick this up. So generally, I would either pick this up by going through Earth Shield into Elemental Orbit to then Refreshing Waters, or by going Healing Stream Totem to Elemental Resistance to Refreshing Waters. Whichever path you take, it's entirely up to you. It's the same amount of points if you are on Restoration because you already have Chain Heal, so you just go 1, 2, or you're going to go through Earth Shield 1, 2, and then you're there. In general, if you're going to be coming through Wind Shear into Fire and Ice, then this is just 2 points to pick up. So if you're not going into Chain Heal, if you're not interested in that Earth Shield, I would recommend just Healing Stream, Elemental Resistance, Refreshing Waters to kind of save yourself a point. Because if you're not already spec'd into Chain Heal, then you've got to go Earth Shield, Elemental Orbit, and Chain Heal. So that's 3 points to get here versus the 2, because we're already going to be going to Fire and Ice. Next, we have Elemental Warding. This reduces all magic damage taken by 6%, which to me is more valuable than the Elemental Resistance, but the Elemental Resistance is nice. Again, another reason to go through the Healing Stream Totem here, to be able to get Refreshing Waters and to be able to get that Elemental Warding. That is very nice. Then we have Hex. So Hex is it's skippable, but I generally would recommend that you pick up Hex. So Hex has a 30-second cooldown. It will transform the enemy into a frog for 1 minute. So what you can do is if there's like 2 enemies right next to each other, you can Hex one of them, deal with the other one, and then attack the one that you hexed. It's just really nice, especially in a lot of open world situations where, you know, there are a couple of enemies that you can't avoid pulling, you know, all of them. Like, you have to pull all of them. And so being able to hex one of them is really nice. Next, we have Wind Rush Totem. So this summons a totem at the target location for 15 seconds, which continually grants all allies 40% increased movement speed for 5 seconds. Absolutely skippable in open world content. There's really no reason to be picking this up. It's just you have Ghost Wolf and other forms of movement speed increase here. So easy skip. Next, we have Primordial Bond. While you have an elemental active, your damage taken is reduced by 5%. So generally speaking here, this is going to be more valuable if you have more elementals to work with. So particularly if you are going Elemental Shaman, you have a couple of different extra elementals you can get besides the Earth Elemental. This one's okay. I consider it mostly skippable because, again, having an elemental active is a little bit difficult. So every 5 minutes, you can have an Earth Elemental out for 1 minute. Again, if you're elemental, then you could have a fire or a storm elemental as well. But again, like, you could put this point somewhere else, but also it's a totally fine pickup if you don't have anything else to do with your points. Spirit Walker's Grace. So this will allow you to move while casting your shaman spells for 15 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. Generally, I'm not too worried about this in open world content. This is more useful in things like raids where you want to keep casting your spells, but you got to move out of, you know, the fire and stuff like that. So generally a skip for me for shaman. Ancestral Guidance, so this will vary here. So if we're looking at Restoration and we're looking at Elemental, so for the next 10 seconds, 10% of your healing done and 25% of damage done is converting to healing. Elemental, again, same thing. You're going to convert healing and damage done to healing. In general, I don't usually pick this one up. It's a 2-minute cooldown that basically, for whatever spec you're playing, converts damage you deal into healing, basically for yourself. But generally speaking, you know, we're going to be able to heal up through other things like our Healing Surge, etc. So not really like a top pickup for me here either. Thunderstorm is a 30-second cooldown that calls down a bolt of lightning, deals damage to enemies, and either knocks them up or away from the shaman. Just a nice CC ability to have on a 30-second cooldown. This does knock them away a pretty good distance. So in my opinion, if you're going to pick up Thunderstorm, then you're going to want to drop down here to this choose talent, and you're going to want to make it so that Thunderstorm knocks them up instead of away, because you don't want to knock them into other enemies that get pulled that you didn't want to fight yet. But in general, I do pick up Thunderstorm. One of the reasons for that is we really want to get Lightning Lasso, which we'll cover here in a minute. And I think out of the 3 things that lead to Lightning Lasso, this is the most kind of universally usable and useful one. Next, we have Voodoo Mastery. Your Hex target is slowed during Hex, which I'm not too worried about that. It's slowed for 6 seconds after it ends. That's okay. Reduce the cooldown of Hex by 15 seconds. So if you find yourself using Hex all the time, this is worth picking up to cut the cooldown of Hex in half. So if you find yourself in a position where, you Hex something and then you kill something, and then you kill it, and Hex is still on cooldown when you're ready for the next group, then sure, pick this up, but otherwise this is skippable. Next, we have Totemic Focus. So increase the radius of your totems, which is fine. Generally, we're not using a whole lot of totems just in the base Shaman kit for open world content. So, it's not great. And increase the duration of your Earthbind and Earthgrab totems. Again, we don't really use those too much. But increases the duration of your Healing Stream totem by 3 seconds. So that can be a nice pickup just to get your Healing Stream totem out for 18 seconds instead of 15 if you want, but otherwise definitely skippable. If you do pick up Windrush totem, then you have a choice node here, so you can make it so that the cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds and the movement speed effect lasts an additional 2 seconds, or you can make it so that the movement bonus is increased and it removes snares. Again, to me, absolutely no reason to pick up Windrush totem, so I would skip this talent as well. And then finally, we have the effects of your weapon imbues are increased by 15%. You're going to be using weapon imbues on all 3 specializations, even if it's just Flame Tongue weapon for all 3 specializations. So this is a worthy pickup to me. For enhancement, you're also going to have Storm Strike on your weapon, which is really nice. And then Restoration, I believe, does have a sort of healing weapon enhancement they can pick up, which is not too crazy for open world content, but you do get increased effect from it from enhanced imbues. So worth a pickup for me. On to the next row, we can choose between Graceful Spirit or Spirit Walker's Aegis. So again, this is if we've picked up Spirit Walker's Grace, this will modify it. This will reduce the cooldown and increase the movement speed. This one will make you immune to silence and interrupt. Again, I normally would not pick up Spirit Walker's Grace here, so I wouldn't pick up this talent either. Next, to me, this is a mandatory pickup. This is going to be Lightning Lasso. All 3 specializations should have this 45-second cooldown ability that grips the target in lightning, stuns them for 5 seconds, and deals a lot of nature damage to them over that time, and you can continue to move while this is channeling. This is a 5-second stun plus really high damage ability on a 45-second cooldown, and it is very useful for all 3 specializations. Again, mandatory pickup to me. Next, we have Totemic Projection. So this relocates your active totems to a specified location. Again, we're not using totems all that much, just in kind of the core Shaman builds here, so this one's an easy skip. Then we have Totemic Surge. This reduces the cooldown of your totems by 6 seconds. Now, this one I do think is decent if you have picked up Healing Stream Totem, because this will allow you to put that Healing Stream Totem out even more. Also, we get a little bit of reduction on the cooldown for our Capacitor Totem, which we will use occasionally as well. So this is an okay pickup. You can skip it if you want, but considering how many points you have available, I think it's a pretty easy one to put a point into. And then we have Seasoned Winds. Interrupting a spell with Wind Shear decreases your damage taken from that spell school by 15% for 18 seconds, and this can stack up to 2 times. This is really nice. We are going to be interrupting enemies. Generally speaking, in an area, enemies are going to have the same type of damage, whether that's, shadow damage or fire damage or whatever. So this just gives us some passive damage reduction when we do interrupt an enemy that's casting a spell, which we'll be doing pretty often. So pretty easy pickup for me here as well. Our next tier, we've got Mana Spring. So your Lava Burst or Storm Strike casts, and this may change here. So Lava Burst here. and then Lava Burst and Riptide on Restoration. So this will cause those to restore mana to you and nearby allies. Allies can only benefit from one of these effects at a time. This is a skip for me, but it's actually a pickup because we do want to get Nature's Swiftness, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Next, like I mentioned with Thunderstorm pickup, you're going to want to come here. You have a choice node. So Thunder Shock will cause Thunderstorm to knock enemies up instead of away, and it reduces the cooldown to by 5 seconds. So we get a 25-second cooldown. Or we have Traveling Storms. Thunderstorm can be cast on allies, and it reduces enemy movement speed by 60% and knocks them further away. Again, we don't want to knock enemies further away. We don't have an ally to cast things on. We don't want to pick this up. However, Thunder Shock is a nice pickup here because this causes the enemies to get knocked up instead of away, which means there's less likelihood that we knock them into more enemies that come over, and now we have to deal with, just an absurd amount of enemies to fight. So I highly recommend Thunder Shock here as a pickup. Next, we have Poison Cleansing Totem. So this is a 45-second cooldown. You drop a totem and it removes poison effects. Again, not something we're going to use very often here. Maybe if you're in an area where you're getting poisoned all the time. Then we have Totemic Recall. So this resets the cooldown of your most recently used totem with a base cooldown shorter than 3 minutes. Pretty much the only totems we end up using at the base Shaman level are going to be Capacitor Totem, which already has a 1-minute cooldown, which is actually down to 54 seconds because of Totemic Surge. And then also Healing Stream Totem, which is 30 seconds down to 24 with Totemic Surge. So we don't really have a lot of use for Totemic Recall here. So in general, it's going to be a skip for me. Coming down to the bottom tier here are capstones. We have Nature's Swiftness. Okay, so your next healing or damaging nature spell is instant cast and costs no mana. So generally what I would do is go Mana Spring into Nature's Swiftness. Nature's Swiftness to me is a really, really good ability, especially in open world content. It's a minute cooldown, and what you can do is you can kind of macro this to cast Nature's Swiftness into your primary big healing spell as kind of an oh crap heal. You could also put this into like a DPS one as well, but generally I use Nature's Swiftness to get off that like big heal when I really need one. Then we have Stone Bulwark Totem. So this will summon a totem at your feet that will absorb damage for 15 seconds. And this is a really nice defensive cooldown totem. It is on a 3-minute cooldown. We're okay with that because generally, we're just going to put this out and mitigate some of the damage that we take, or we're going to drop it when we're fighting a rare, an elite, or we found ourselves in a sticky situation. This does kind of make us rethink about some of the totem pickups here, but not really. We've got our cooldown reduction here. We're not really worried about moving this totem around with us. We could potentially, if you find yourself using that totem and you're not running out of the shielding before the 30 seconds is up, then you might want to grab Totemic Projection to just move that totem around with you. But generally speaking, you're probably just going to get all of that absorption knocked out when you first cast the totem. And then also Totemic Recall is for totems that have cooldowns shorter than 3 minutes. This one has a 3-minute cooldown, so it doesn't apply. I'm not actually sure if Totemic Surge makes it so that this would apply. I've never tested that in game, but again, skip the point. However, if you did pick up Totemic Recall, then you have a choice to reduce the cooldown by 60 seconds, so it's down to 2 minutes, or to make it affect an additional totem. So again, I wouldn't pick up Totemic Recall here for open world content, so I wouldn't pick up this talent either. So at this point, with what we've kind of plugged in here, we've got, 4 points left. This is going to depend on your specialization and where you start out at, etc. So if you're on, restoration, you probably put a point into Lava Burst at this point. So you just plug in wherever you need to. But that's my thought on the Shaman class trees. Honestly, there are some really nice sort of quality of life features in here, but there's also just like a lot of optional pickups that you may or may not get depending on your build. Whether or not you like managing totems is going to play a big part in here as well. But there's a lot of, in my opinion, kind of skippable stuff on the talent tree that really just allows you to build into what you prefer, and it doesn't feel too mandatory. So that's my thoughts on the Shaman class talent tree. We're going to continue this on, and later on we'll be looking at builds for the different specializations as well as the hero talent trees. So if you enjoyed this content, like the video, hit the subscribe button, and share the video with a friend that you think might like playing Shaman in the upcoming War Within expansion. And I appreciate you taking time to watch one of my videos, and I'll see you on the next one.